Oh, hello. I'm Sketch.
And I'm Shades.
And this is Cowabunga Dudes. Welcome back, everybody.
Acapella.
It was a shell of a time. I'm trying to think of the other ones.
It was totally tubular.
Yeah. Guys, thanks for joining us once again in between locations. How's it going, Shades?
I'm fantastic, Sketch. How are you?
As you said, I'm totally radical. Sick guitar riff.
Eclectic.
Guys, if you are joining us live, I always say that in quotes, then you just listened to a doozy. You just put in put in your street cred there on that one.
50th episode.
It was a big one.
It was, and joined by our guest hosts, Brad and Chuck of the Chuck and Brad podcast. Thanks so much, guys, for going down the manhole.
It was
so to speak,
a lot of fun.
It was, yeah.
And I think if you heard the episode, you can tell that we had a lot of fun.
We did.
Yeah. We brought a lot of joy to that sewer. So we went all over the Turtles universe. But Shades, is there anything in particular you'd like to retract, restate, add?
No, I stand by my my thoughts on the Turtles universe.
Yeah. No, I do too. It has a soft spot in my soul. Turtles, growing up with it.
It does. Yeah.
I was trying to think if there was any other property that I grew up with as much as Turtles. And I just don't think there was. I think Turtles was like my most defining media experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Sketch. And I was really thinking about the properties that I loved as a child, and just to rattle off a few, there were Ghostbusters and the Real Ghostbusters. There was Mask. I don't know if you remember Mask.
Yeah, the Jim Carrey movie that turned into
No, not The Mask. This was a cartoon about a mobile assault strike force team. I forgot what the K stands for. But they were vehicles that turned into like other vehicles and bases. It was called Mask. I really loved that as a child. Rock Lords, GoBots, Transformers, and while those things and those properties always existed, it was Ninja Turtles was always pervasive in the background of everything in the culture, and I think that had to do so much with the merchandising.
I honestly looked up, no lie, I looked up when pizza got big in America, because I was like, Ninja Turtles had to have helped boost pizza sales. And technically it didn't, because the pizza existed in America since the 50s, but it had to have changed it to a kid-friendly food.
I agree. I think it did a lot for particularly like the Pizza Hut, Domino's, Papa John's aspect of fast food, commercialized, branded pizza. Yeah. Certainly in my hometown growing up, I mean, there were a number of pizzerias, and in the I would say the late 80s and early 90s, they seemed to take a hit. And I attribute that to the rise of Domino's and the rise of Pizza Hut. And I would attribute the rise of both of those to the Ninja Turtles.
There you go. So a roundabout way. But that does bring me up to a question that I forgot to ask during the main episode.
I will try to give you a big A.
Well, you'll be able to give me a big A because it's a personal question.
A medium-sized A.
It's going to be a very personal big A from you.
A personal A. A personal pan A,
personal pan A. When you were a young boy. Okay. Can you think back?
Yep. Thinking back. Little shades.
Were you ever into like the gross things? Like, you know what I mean? Like the turtles are a good example. They live in a sewer. They make things out of trash.
Like the Garbage Pail Kids?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean like creepy crawlies and like just like making a mess and being gross and stinky and all that stuff.
No.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
No,
and I thought that
I was not
watching
into that.
back on Turtles, I was like, you know, they really deposited that little boys were just gross beings that just liked garbage and mud and
sewer dwellers.
Yeah, and you know, I think we've done a good job of late in our culture of saying like, listen, not all girls are princesses and ponies. But I don't know if we've reversed the trend of boys are just gross beings that are just wallowing in filth.
I mean, that's a little bit too much real world in my fake worlds. I don't know.
It struck me as someone who never liked to get messy.
I will say I didn't really latch on to that aspect of even really being outdoors other than playing on playgrounds and just, you know, playing outside as a child. Yeah. My crunchy, earthy phase didn't start until after college.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I mean, and that's natural world stuff too, as opposed to this.
I didn't like camping. I didn't like being outside. I didn't like being on the ground as a child. Yeah. You know, dirty, like being dirty, playing in the dirt. Didn't go in on that.
The payoff never was worth it when it came to having to clean everything up. You know what I mean? Strong
agree. Yeah.
And even in my adult life, I still don't like. And Egyptology is a messy field.
It is a messy field.
And you know, working on vehicles and doing art. Like, I'm not afraid of a mess, but always when it's the byproduct of some sort of creativity, then I'm fine with it. Mess for mess sake, it does nothing for me.
I'm not on board with that. I think that's probably the argument that Elise and I have the most is organization and picking things up when we're done with them.
Yeah. It was honestly just an observation I had when I was rewatching, especially like the old series.
Yes. Yeah.
And the 90s live actions too. I forgot
I
how
certainly
gross things
never
are.
had I never had any desire to crawl down into a sewer.
No.
Let's put it that way. No matter how cool the Ninja Turtles seemed.
I remember when I was a kid, one time I did lift up the grate of a storm drain and went down there. But that was more of a curiosity thing. And that was...
Were you lured by a cartoonish, terrifying clown?
Oh, no. No. He was very nice. And we spent many afternoons together.
Ooh, sketch.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was what? Like
we all float down here.
It was like 4 feet deep. It was like nothing. I was just interested.
You are incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Why am I lucky?
That you didn't get trapped down there, that you didn't drown, that Pennywise didn't come and snatch you away.
Just count my blessings.
Yeah.
I made it out of the dangerous 90s.
You did. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, I think there is certainly truth in conditioning and nature and nurture and everything's pink for girls, everything's blue for boys, and we certainly project our ideas of what male and female are onto children and our offspring. And I think you're right. I think we're getting to a better place. Yeah. There's we talk about dysmorphic body image and eating issues and diet issues with women, but those things are also pervasive with men in terms of body image, particularly in the age of Marvel, like Greek god superheroes. Absolutely. That was a big thing in my last few years of teaching. We were starting to see like dysmorphic body image in students and in teenagers. And it's certainly a real thing. It's no one gender or age group has a lock on that. And, I think you're right. I think the conversation maybe hasn't expanded yet in the way that it should to everyone. But I think it's great that we're having these conversations, period, full stop.
Yeah. There you go. Final question: is that where the term toxic masculinity came from? Just toxic ooze.
Yes.
All these gross men were just born in that bubbling cesspit of late 80s, early 90s sewage / radioactive runoff.
It is the byproduct of TCRI, and I think we should file a class action lawsuit.
All right. So we nailed that one down. I think we fixed it.
Sure.
Yeah, we got it. We'll button up that issue.
Sure.
And send it down to shipping. So, guys, that was our Turtles conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. 50 big episodes, but we're not stopping.
We are not.
And you know what else isn't stopping? The news.
and the news is not good if you're a fan of Spider-Man.
We've had, since our last midstream came out, a lot of news, and I would say 80% of it has been Spider-Man based.
Yes.
So do you want to bring us up to speed? Are you familiar with it enough?
Just a brief recap. In 2015, Marvel and Sony inked a deal to lend Spider-Man back to Disney Marvel. Sony has controlled the rights to Spider-Man since 1996, when Sony bought the licensing rights to live-action Spider-Man, animated Spider-Man for a sum of $7 million, which when you inflate to 2019 numbers is something like $38 million. And you could say, oh, that's not a lot of money. That's a inexpensive sum for Spider-Man. Marvel, which was in bankruptcy at the time, just hemorrhaging money through a number of bad decisions, most of which were related to Spider-Man. This is coming out of the era of the Clone Saga. Marvel actually offered the entire catalog to Sony. They offered all of their characters to Sony. Wow. And Sony just said, go back to them and just make a deal for Spider-Man. So I think Marvel had offered them everyone for like $50 million, and Sony kind of said, no, we don't want everyone. We don't want your debt. Just make a deal for Spider-Man. And that's where the Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies came from. And you could say, $7 million, not a lot of money. Sure, whatever. It was enough to keep Marvel afloat. Mm-hmm. They would have gone out of business. Mm-hmm. I mean, somebody else would have bought them eventually, but they would have become a corporate subsidy much earlier in their existence. Yeah. In a similar way that DC has with Warner Brothers. They sold out in the late 80s, I believe. So fast forward, you get this deal with Sony and Marvel, and they're going to share Spider-Man. Spider-Man's going to guest in the MCU universe, and in return, Disney is going to put up the production fee, the entirety of the production budget for all standalone Spider-Man movies. Kevin Feige is going to act as producer, but Sony is going to retain all of the standalone movie rights. They're going to get all of that Spider-Man money, except for first day $1 box office gross. Okay. They get 5% of the box office gross from day one figures. Mm-hmm. And then Marvel got all of the merchandising rights to Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's not just movie-related merchandising rights to Spider-Man. That is all Spider-Man-related merchandising. Okay. So you have to ask yourself, what's the bigger issue here? Disney paying for a movie or Disney getting all of the Spider-Man merch money? What's the sweeter deal here? Mm-hmm. The back out clause here is that if the movies don't make $1 billion, Sony can back out anytime. Okay. The first movie only made $888 million. Only. I mean, that seems what a bummer. So gauche to say only. $888 million.
We're talking Homecoming.
Spider-Man Homecoming. Far From Home did make $1 billion, and I think it benefited from being the first movie post Endgame.
Oh, absolutely.
So it grosses $1 billion. Spider-Man Far From Home becomes the highest grossing movie for Sony of all time. It beat out Skyfall, the James Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Far From Home is the highest grossing Sony movie of all time. It's the highest grossing Spider-Man movie. And so Disney tried to renegotiate their deal with Sony.
Okay.
What they proposed was splitting the production 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Renegotiating their box office take and retaining all of the merchandising rights.
Okay.
And Sony pulled the plug.
Mm-hmm.
They walked away. We don't, who's at fault, who walked away, who killed it. There's a couple of wrinkles here. Disney's acquisition of Fox, the acquisition of the X-Men universe, the Fantastic Four, and Kevin Feige is going to produce those as well and redevelop them for the MCU in Phase 5, I believe. We'll start to see the X-Men and Fantastic Four.
Wow.
Yeah, not for a while, but there's going to be some time on task in redeveloping, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. So Sony balked at the deal. They offered a few different configurations in which they would continue to license Spider-Man back to the MCU. Disney refused every subsidiary deal that they offered. Okay. Sony was not willing to do a 50-50 split, but they did, give some money back to it. But their contingent was that Kevin Feige would continue to serve as executive producer on these movies, to which Disney said no. And they've kind of spun it a few different ways. Like he's too busy, his plate's too full. He's going to do the X-Men. He's going to do the Fantastic Four. I think if you're Disney looked at this and said, we just gave another studio the highest grossing movie of the year, next to Endgame. And our guy worked on it. Like, we're not sharing him anymore. This was too successful, I think, is what Disney looked at, that we're not making enough money off these movies, and we've given our Wonder Boy to another studio. So as of 1 hour ago, IGN reported that, quote, for the moment, the door is closed. Sony Pictures chairman Tony Vinciquerra has said that for now, there are no negotiations, no deals to be made. The door is closed. We're taking back Spider-Man.
Yeah. I saw that tweet.
And there's no, and quote, there's no ill will between Sony and Marvel over the end of the Spider-Man deal. And there's some surprise there at the fan backlash at Sony, as if, Sony seems to be the bad guy in press and media among fanboys. I don't know. I think both studios are to blame.
I think both are to blame.
Yeah, I have to look at this and say, we're the fans.
Yep.
We, the fans, are the ones who are going to pay the price,
Correct.
Be most hurt, and are ultimately at fault. Because we continue to pay for this shit.
Yeah.
Because these studios know that we will consume anything in these universes.
We're the ones that make it as valuable as it is.
Yes. Because we love them so much, we will pay any price, any amount for the chance to experience wonder. Just for an hour and 15 minutes. Yep. We will shill out any amount of money. And the studios know that, and so they don't have to go the extra step. So there's going to be 2 more standalone Spider-Man movies. They're not going to be in the MCU. Tom Holland is out. Spider-Man is out. No Spider-Man for Phase 4, which is really problematic.
Very problematic.
I mean, they laid the groundwork to make Spider-Man the
Yeah, the new Tony.
The new Tony Stark, that
they
were going to build the MCU around him. Clearly. And that's not the case, and it's not going to be the case. And, it doesn't mean that Spider-Man won't make his way back into the MCU at some point, but I doubt that it'll be Tom Holland. I doubt that it'll be in the interconnected Avengers universe. Yeah. And so that's done. But there is a Spider-Verse in the MCU that now Tom Holland can inhabit.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a Venom spinoff. There's a Morbius spinoff. There's a Spider-Gwen spinoff happening. There's an Into the Spider-Verse 2 happening, which they've already talked about bringing Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield into that. I can't
imagine they wouldn't bring Tom in at this point.
Yeah, I can't imagine they're not going to bring Tom Holland in at this point. And we're going to get more Spider-Man movies, and I think it's going to be okay. I think the universe has been laid out. Certainly Far From Home was much less interconnected to the MCU in terms of characters than Homecoming. Yeah. So, you scale back on that, you do the same thing. I think you and I even said, we were trying to figure out in that episode what was Sony, what was Marvel, and we seemed to like the smaller,
yes, absolutely,
Spider-Man, Sony-centric.
What we both assumed were the Sony aspects of the movie.
Right, we don't know that, but what we attributed the Sony aspects of the movie, we seemed to enjoy more.
Yeah, the moments where it didn't have to play into the world at large.
Yeah,
for sure. I'll tell you though, where I'm bummed is, the relationship with Happy and Peter has been growing so wonderfully. And now that is just going to have a hard stop.
That is dashed. And, they really created a hiccup for themselves, giving Peter the resources of Tony Stark.
Yes.
Edith, but not just Edith, his financial security and resources, his ability to make suits, his ability to... Now that his identity is out, who gives a shit? Because he's a billionaire, essentially. That's all got to go away, and that's going to be problematic for both Sony and Marvel to deal with. They're just not going to address it, but that's a big rant for me if they don't address it.
Yeah, it'll be a big hole. Each
really
side now that they're going their separate ways is going to have a big absence. And I did say when the news finally, when it did break, my first thought was that well, then there's nobody in MCU that I'm behind. There's no heart left in the MCU now that the original Avengers have retired. Who are we going to be following that is a relatable, down to earth character? I don't know.
Yeah, I will agree. There, with the exception of Doctor Strange. I am not really invested at all in the characters that they're bringing forward and the stories that they're going to tell. I know people are excited for Ms. Marvel and Kamala Khan to get their day in the sun. I have to look at that and say they did such a poor job with Captain Marvel. I don't know if the MCU has the bravery to do Kamala Khan's story justice, and tell that story in a meaningful way. The character that would have been most accessible for her would have been Spider-Man. And now he's gone, in terms of connection to the MCU, because she doesn't have any relation to Carol. Carol has no connection to Earth. Black Panther's kind of a mess in the larger MCU, where they've left him with Infinity War and Endgame. It feels really disconnected from the larger story. They have to tell a new story now, and I don't know.
There's certainly some damage control to do now,
and I'm reaching my atrophy point with superhero movies.
I think a lot of people are. I think we're probably getting to the point where, this continuity has been what a lot of people are well, I have to see the next one. I have to see the next one. And if we're going to be shaking up too much and taking out too many of the familiarities, then I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, I don't need to anymore. I don't need to go see this one. I don't need to go see that one.
I think Warner Brothers and DC have kind of drawn that line in the sand and said, well, wait, we don't actually need to have this giant interconnected universe.
Yeah.
And are putting out standalone movies which is very tertiary, kind of fun throwaway connections to a larger, stable and universe of characters. That Superman cameo at the end of Shazam was a throwaway cameo, but it was fun. Sure. And sure. Superman's gonna have lunch with Shazam. Yeah. Why not?
Why not?
Oh, it's not Henry Cavill. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, DC movies now are certainly interconnected in just the fan base's background knowledge.
Yes.
And no longer
and maybe that's all we need.
You know what? It's fun. It's fun for people in the know. It's fun to have those connections.
And if you're not in the know, get in the know. It only costs you $3.99 to get in the know.
There you go.
Read a comic.
There you go. One comic is all you will need to know the entire DCU.
Totally.
Yep.
Done.
Yep. And that comic is, of course, Ambush Bug.
Yes. Oh, man. Ambush Bug.
All right. Well, shifting gears from Spider-Man for a second. Unfortunately, though, not shifting from Disney. We'll have to give Disney a little more airtime. There's also been the announcements of the Star Wars series. Television series.
The Mandalorian. Everybody's losing their shit.
The Mandalorian and the Obi-Wan series.
The Obi-Wan series, right.
With Ewan McGregor. Both series on Disney Plus.
I don't know, Sketch.
Not a fan?
So Solo happened. That was a thing.
Solo did happen.
And it killed. Basically, it prevented Disney from ever attempting to put out any kind of movie involving any amount of risk ever again. And it looks like they've doubled down on Disney Plus series.
For sure.
Which don't have to be good because the hype is going to drive subscribers with disposable income to their platform. So whether the series is good or not, Disney makes their money.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is put out a limited, I guess, 8-episode series of something.
I am excited about the Ewan McGregor project. Because I don't feel like he would do something with this character that he wasn't personally invested in. He's been pulling this for a while, wanting to do this.
He was pulling for a movie for a long time. I don't know about the series. I think series can be dangerous because you write you write a script and then you have to pad that script out in some way. And it worked in Titans. It didn't work in Daredevil. It worked in Battlestar Galactica, which turned into Battlestar Galactica. It did not work in what was garbage. I can't think of
other garbage
series now. But it for every series that it works for, it doesn't work for another series. And I don't know. I'm not excited for Disney Plus. I'm not going to get Disney Plus. So I'm not going to see it. So I'm not going to let myself get excited because I would love to see Ewan McGregor in another Obi-Wan property. But I mean, really, what adventures are left for us to see of Obi-Wan? We've seen the conclusion of his story with Darth Maul in Rebels. We know where his story ends on the Death Star in Episode 4. We know, his confrontation with Anakin in Episode 3. Really, what is left for Obi-Wan other than to watch him on Tatooine watching a young Luke, and like maybe there are adventures with young Luke and younger Obi-Wan.
Well, for me,
slightly older Obi-Wan.
the big area that is still left untouched that the series would be the perfect avenue for is the communication with the Force and becoming one with the entity that Yoda kind of hints at the very end of Revenge of the Sith. That he'll be able to commune with Qui-Gon again. I think it would be really neat. I would really like a series that delved more on that kind of inward journey than some sort of explosion-laden lightsaber wielding adventure. Almost more like psychological and reflective, almost like when you think of the moments on Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back with Yoda, kind of learning the ins and outs.
I'm with you, and just kind of devil's advocate here. I think that works in 22 minutes of a 120-minute film. I don't know if that works for hours at a time across an 8 or a 13 episode series.
Well, and who even knows if that's what they'll do? But
True.
I mean, that was one of the things that Rebels I thought did nicely, was they really tied in Ezra's journey into the Force, they were shying away from that for a while, and I like that was one of the things I liked about Solo, was that it was Force vacant.
Force
yeah, forceless. But with Obi-Wan at that point in his life, that's the perfect story for
all he's got going
a guy
on.
like me to take in. So time will tell. I'm also not going to get Disney Plus, but I will be willing to get like a month of it when I have like the free time to binge a couple shows. I would do that.
I would be more willing to spend like $30 on the season on Amazon than I am to give Disney any amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, if they do that,
their
that's another way to do it. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, everything eventually makes its way to Amazon.
Mm-hmm. So time will tell. These properties.
Sketch, you got anything else you want to talk about this week?
After talking to Chuck and Brad, I did sit down and watch The Fate of the Furious. That's the 8th Fast and Furious movie that I had not seen yet. And holy shit, I was like, I've seen them all. And I just kept being like, how did we get here? How did we get here? But I do want to watch it with you some point for a Patreon exclusive with the first one, because there is a scene in The Fate of the Furious that I really want to be present for when you see. And I don't want to say it because it would like spoil a lot of the 8th movie and the 7th movie. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But there's a fight sequence that I really would like you to see.
Cool. I am down for that. Whenever you want to tackle those and do that movie, I'm all in. Have you seen Hobbs and Shaw
Not
yet?
I wanted to see 8 before I saw Hobbs and Shaw. So
I cannot imagine how the Fast and Furious have gotten to this stage. Like we talked about it. It's, guys, if you want to listen to the Fast and Furious thesis from Chuck and Brad, you can head over to our Patreon, become a Patreon subscriber. You get access to that 10-minute episode. And I just don't understand how we got here. And but my God, is it entertaining?
It's
Hobbs and Shaw was fan-flippin' tastic.
Yeah. It's not fine art, but it's fun art.
It is fun art. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it.
Yep. That's it, though.
Should we transition to
next week?
This week's upcoming episode?
Yes. Next week, the leaves are changing. Children are going back to school. Pumpkin Spice is back at Duncan.
But it's still summer.
So it's time for a summertime wrap-up.
It's our summer of season 3 wrap-ups.
Specifically,
I was trying to think of another S to put in there, or it just didn't.
There's lots of S's.
Didn't happen,
but that's okay.
No, didn't happen.
It's specifically our Netflix properties that we've been following along on Geeking Out. We're talking Stranger Things. There's an S for you.
Season 3,
and Jessica Jones season 3 / final season / end of the Netflix Marvel universe.
Yes.
So we tackled them both in one episode because we've already talked before about the previous seasons of both of these shows. So that will be our next episode, our Netflix summer season 3 spectacular.
Yeah, there we go. Summer of season 3 spectacular.
Love it.
Yeah. So guys, thanks for listening. If you have not yet heard our big 50th episode, head on over and do that and hang on, strap in, hold on to your shells. And
go to the bathroom
a
before tuning in.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, definitely.
Sure.
And we will see you next week for our summer of season 3 spectacular.
Very good, you got it. The Shades and Sketch summer of season 3 spectacular.
Oh, sketch! Oh my goodness, I think that's going to be a running thing. How many
S's
what can we expand? How many S's can we get in there?
I'll get out my encyclopedia.
There we go.
Through them. See you later, guys.
See you next time.
Ya.